Hokairi, welcome back to my channel, May Between the Pages. My name is Taylor, and today I'm joined for another episode of Page Chewing by my lovely co-host as always. And today, our guest is none other than Jackson Dickert.
Woo! I love him.
I wonder why. He does a million things in the bookish space. But if you haven't heard of him before, I'd like to give you a chance, Jackson, to just kind of introduce yourself. Let us know a couple of the things that you do in the bookish world if people haven't heard of you before.
Yeah, so I'm Jackson. I'm an author. I am the chief marketing officer at campfirewriting.com, there's like writing software and then to the publishing space a little bit. I also do Between Two Perns, which you might have seen before, which is a satirical interview series where it's kind of like roasting like authors. If you've ever seen Zach Galifianakis's Between Two Ferns, it's just that. It's just that. And then I've written one book and I'm querying a new one. So woohoo! I think that's all the things.
We'll get into each of those points. Like I said, you're in all of the different sectors. But one thing that I wanted to start with that is a through line through everything that you do is humor. And not only is humor a place where we can have jokes and laugh at each other and have a lighthearted conversation, but we also use it as humans to heal, to connect, to talk about different things, even to call out others in a space where maybe we wouldn't be able to do it without the humor, or have empathetic conversations we couldn't address without having humor involved. So humor does a lot rather than just jokes. And I'm curious for you if this has been something that you've done throughout your whole life. Has humor always been a part of your life, or is it something that came out through the creative process when you started entering that world?
Yeah, so it's definitely kind of been my whole life. My dad was a pretty funny guy growing up. He turned 50 and he's not funny anymore. So I know I have a timetable that I'm working on here. But growing up, I was kind of always the class clown. I know that's a big shock, but
couldn't have imagined it.
I know, me of all people. But I wasn't like a disruptive class clown. I wouldn't say. I'd probably have some teachers that would disagree, but I actually had a teacher pull me aside when I graduated high school. It was my freshman year teacher. And she was like, I just wanted to say what a pleasure you were to have in the classroom, because you'd like, say a joke or whatever. And then like, it kind of reel everybody back in. Everybody would laugh at the joke. And then it was like a good way for her to kind of take the reins back to continue teaching or whatever. So I actually had like more than one teacher tell me that, which is kind of neat. I did peak in high school because I was voted wittiest then. So, I don't think I'm going to get voted.
That.
Yeah. So I do have a history, I guess. I've got a history.
Yeah, it's something that I think everyone can feel when they interact with you. I was very lucky to have met you in Glasgow. That's where we made this connection. I think it was over a glass of whiskey. I'm not sure. The whole weekend is a blur. The whole week is a blur, but pretty sure that's where that occurred. And you do have a sense of just kind of bringing some brevity to a conversation and making everyone more relaxed. So I can say from personal experience that I feel what your teachers were talking about.
Well, thank you very much. That's very sweet.
Of course. But humor is something that takes being able to read a room. You mentioned that you were able to bring the class back for the teachers, probably because you have your finger on the pulse of where that line is and how a room might react to it. But humor is a difficult thing because depending on where you are, that line is different. When you're doing stand-up comedy or interacting with people and networking, you kind of can feel that room. But when you're writing, your book is comedic, you can't really throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks, right? So how do you change your approach to humor when it's written, when it's something that you can't really interact with someone in real time?
My favorite part about writing humor is like, in real life, there are times where I'll think of something really funny to say, but before I can get it in there, someone else will have already started talking. And like, I don't want to interrupt somebody else when they're talking. And so sometimes, you can give it, 10 or 15 seconds and they'll say their thing and then you can jump in with it. But a lot of times what'll happen is you've thought of something to say and like, it can't be your turn to talk all the time. Except for, I guess on my YouTube channel. But yeah, so what's nice is in a book, it's always your turn to talk because like you're talking for all the different characters. So like everyone can kind of always say whatever you need them to set you up for the next joke. And like in terms of Quest for the Golden Plunger, which is my currently only published book, it has like a wide range of humor. And I think sometimes people are surprised. I went and looked at my Goodreads the other day and I saw somebody had left a review saying how funny it was, but then they were surprised because they cried reading it. And I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, what a compliment. Like that's to get somebody to feel that full like spectrum of emotion of both laughing out loud and like, brings a reader to tears. That's kind of cool. But yeah, I think that's the biggest difference for me is, a lot of times my brain is just naturally finding the connections between things, whether they're humorous or otherwise. And so when I'm writing, I can just control both sides of that, where I can kind of always get that punchline in, right on time instead of having to, as you say, read the room and, make sure that I'm not like, talking over somebody else or something like that.
Right. Well, Between Two Perns shows that you can do that just fine. We'll get to that in a moment, but I would like to talk about the written form a little bit longer. It is a risk though, because humor is subjective. Everyone's humor is subjective, right? So, one of the things that both of us have in common, and PL has started his Sando journey, and we've had some really interesting conversations about different perspectives on his writing style. But one of the things you hear as a critique is his humor doesn't work for me, right? So even a writer as large as Sando does have people that love everything else, but this particular subjective element doesn't work. Reading is subjective all over. But what was it that made you decide to go for humor in the written form? Because it is such a subjective aspect of every person.
Yeah, so actually, I think probably like a lot of people, the first book that I tried to write was like a big sprawling epic fantasy. Like I was in the throes of Sando and I was like, I could do this too. There's nothing that can stop me. And then there was something that could stop me. It was my undergrad creative writing professor. And he was one of these guys who like his idea of what literature should be is like divorced men in their 40s who drink whiskey, smoke cigarettes, and have a dog, and they just like are sad. And like that was his idea of like this is what writing should be. And there were only two kids in the class, me and this other dude, who were like, yeah, fantasy. And he was like, this isn't a real thing. This is dog water literature. You don't do this. And so the first thing that I had tried to write, that epic fantasy, it was not good. It was terrible. But instead of like telling me, hey, why don't you work at that? Or, why don't let's find ways that we can kind of like make this better. Instead, he was like, why don't you write something closer to home that you know a bit better? And so I was like, okay, like I could try that. And so I thought about it, and I was a Boy Scout for like, I don't know, 8 years or however many years someone is a Boy Scout for. And, I was like, okay, you know what I know really well? I know teenage boys being dumbasses in the woods at summer camp with no adult supervision. That's what I know really well. And that felt like it lended itself really well to comedy, which I really enjoy too. It kind of just finds its way into everything that I do. And yeah, so that's kind of how that happened. It was because I wasn't good enough at writing epic fantasy to persuade the old man.
Well, I think we're lucky because now we have some more light and humor in the world. But
absolutely, which is never a bad thing.
Oh, not at all. And I just wanted to bring this up real quick. Tammy's here. Hi, Tammy. Hey, thanks for joining us, bestie.
Hi, Tammy. Hey, bestie.
Hey, bestie. She's everyone's bestie now. I wanted to hand it over to PL just because I saw him nodding a lot there. Did you have any thoughts on the humor aspect of this? I didn't want to move on without giving you a chance.
No, thank you. I have lots, but I'm sorry. I'm totally stopped cold now because Jackson said that essentially one of the main reasons he did pursue writing epic fantasy was because of his professor's input. Okay, so clearly, Jackson, the big question is, now that you realize that I could probably write epic fantasy, at least I hope you think that way, would you do it, or are you doing it?
Yeah, so that's the next thing that I'm gonna write is an epic fantasy. I'm coming back. I'm coming back. The old man can't keep me down. So I'm gonna give it a shot, and I have an idea for a story where the protagonist is like a mimic, like the chest chompy kind of mimic. That sounds like fun, and I'm so sorry. The dogs are very excited.
We love puppies here. That's fine.
Good. But yeah, so I'll be giving that a shot. The second thing that I wrote that I have out, I have 2 fulls out right now, so fingers crossed. Is a like kind of a contemporary fantasy slash like cosmic horror-y type of thing. So I'm kind of easing my way back into it.
Okay, so I'm sorry, and I have to ask this follow-up question. So I'm gonna guess that there's gonna be humor in it, even though it sounds like it's more serious, but there's going to be humor in your epic fantasy. So did you find it difficult, or are you finding it difficult to write an epic fantasy that, while of course humor, because humor is part of life. Just for me, what I love fantasies that are, for me, what I would consider well-rounded. They have romance, they have humor, they have action scenes, they have political drama, they have, morality tales. Like, I look for all that in my fantasy. But was it difficult to did you feel you had to tone down the humor, or condense it? Or did it flow organically when you started writing? Did it just, this is just part of it? Like some of our favorite fantasy writers, like the Joe Abercrombies of the world, with that snarky, humor. I mean, it's fantastic, right? Like, humor in a fantasy, when it's done well, really adds something to the work. So how did you find incorporating the humor in your books?
It's I don't want to sound like the worst, but like it comes very naturally for me, and that's like not always a good thing, right? Like, because some people are like, oh, I want to be funnier, and I like want to get that into my books. For me, it's like a monkey's paw thing, where it's like, yeah, you get to be funny, but you can't turn it off. And so everything that I write, it just always just kind of eases and worms its way in. Like I said, the second book that I wrote, it has a lot of cosmic horror in it, and it's funny. I don't, that's a weird combination, but there it is. So, and horror and comedy are actually very similar in a lot. It makes sense, I think, that I ended up going in that direction. But yeah, that was a very long-winded way of saying I don't really try to get it in there. It just kind of finds its way.
Well, I think that's a perfect segue into just continuing to talk about your books and your writing in general. So you mentioned cosmic horror, okay? I love me some cosmic horror, and I discovered this about myself about 2 years ago. I read Gunmetal Gods and blew my mind, and I was like, I like this. Yeah. We had P. Jelly Clark on, and we talked a lot about cosmic horror with him. And he has a quote that stuck with me, which is just, we all love tentacles and we don't know why. And so from my perspective, what I've gathered of what I enjoy about cosmic horror is the idea of taking the absurd and mixing it with real life. That kind of surrealness that it adds to a story that would otherwise be mundane just has its grip on me. So I'm curious for you, what is it you enjoy about cosmic horror, or what is it that writing it, does for you? Where does your love come from?
So I especially like the intersection of spooky and fish. That's so specific, I know. But that's my favorite thing. That's my favorite thing in fiction. That's my favorite thing in fantasy. Like, it's the best thing. It's the best thing. There's a book called The Fisherman. And like, if you haven't read it yet, Taylor, and you're into cosmic horror, you've got to check it out. It is
Fisherman.
wild.
Got it. Writing it down.
And it is so much fun. It is again, the perfect intersection of spooky and fish. There was a game that came out, I guess it was last year, called Dredge. And this is going to sound insane if you haven't heard of it, but it's like a spooky. It's like a cozy cosmic horror fishing simulator.
Okay.
And it sounds like, how could that possibly work? But it does. It's great. In fact, they were nominated at Worldcon for the writing in the game. So I guess I haven't been able to venture totally into cosmic horror yet. Gunmetal Gods has been sitting on my shelf since last Christmas, and I'm gonna get to it. I'm so excited.
Listen,
you got to do it. You got to do it.
I know.
You got to do it.
I've pulled the trigger. I just need to sit down and read it.
I just finished the last book in the series that he's up to date with, Dark Drinker. Oh yeah.
The third book gave me nightmares. So
sign me up.
Yeah.
You'll love it. You'll love it.
You know, when I was doing some research on you for this, I looked at your website, and you love manta rays, right? They're your favorite. I have never met another person who shares my love of stingrays and manta rays. It blew my mind. I don't know why. I'm terrified of the ocean. We're not meant to be there, but something about those creatures, they've been my favorite since I was little. I don't know why.
Me too. Oh my gosh.
I know. I freaked out when I saw that.
They're magnificent. This is not even a joke. I wish I was like the putting on, or like, embellishing. That's the word. I go to the aquarium and I stand in front of and watch all the manta rays and the stingrays do their thing, and I'll just stand there and cry for like 5 to 10 minutes. They are beautiful. They make me happy.
Yes.
And when I have $1 billion, I will have manta rays in my house in a properly large size aquarium, of course. But I will have that, so I can just.
Yeah.
Something a bit, I don't know. Maybe they are beautiful. Like in Barbados, you can see them nightly as they come in.
Oh my gosh!
Depending where you are, and they're stately, but there is something a bit sinister about them. The way they just kind of flutter and float there, like they're just for me. And I'm not one to.
They're smiling sometimes. Smiling about.
There is something a bit, and knowing, of course, that they can sting you and hurt you, but but they're beautiful. They're kind of like, to me, like lions almost, where beautiful, stately, but knowing that they're could be terrifying is something. I don't know. This is me. This is me.
See, I know ththey'd never hurt me, so I don't get that at all.
We're one of them.
Yeah, they recognize that, like,
Yeah, so I just hearing you say that you enjoy spooky and fish together, I feel that, because I love manta and stingrays, but you won't catch me in the ocean. Absolutely not. There's monsters in there. We're not meant to be there. So I think it's a perfect place for cosmic horror. So I also get what PL is saying. There is something sinister about seeing something big moving in the water, right? So definitely. I do think that it's a perfect breeding ground for that. So the book that you're writing now, then, what elements of cosmic horror have you picked up? Have you gone the spooky fish route? Have you gone the more spacey route, seeing things in the sky? Like, what have you picked up from cosmic horror so far?
So in this book, the cosmic horror element is they meet like a thing in a basement. And it is just called the Collector. And there's been like, people and things named that and other stuff, but it's just my favorite thing. Like that, it's so eerie, just right off the bat. There's a thing called the Collector. What's it collecting? Yeah. And so they meet this thing, and it makes a deal with these two boys where they have to trade something, and they basically get like superpowers. And so one boy, the protagonist, he steals the superpowers, kind of simplifying it, but he steals the superpowers instead of making the deal. And then his friend, who is kind of his bully too, he makes a deal. And so afterwards, that boy is drastically changed. And at the end, you get to find out what he traded in order to get his powers. And so it kind of goes back and forth between following the boy 10 years in the past, and then his older sister in the present. And as she kind of also unravels like what happened to him, all that good stuff. And there's cryptids. So There is like a scene that takes place in the bottom of a lake in Georgia, but where there is a big fish. But besides that, not a ton of spooky fish in it, unfortunately.
Gotcha. Sounds more urban fantasy-esque.
Yeah, I don't know what we're supposed to call it because it's like urban fantasy, and then somebody told me it's contemporary fantasy, but it's like those two things mixed with cosmic horror, I'd say.
Sounds like a fun blend to me. I wanted to put this up because we jokingly called Tammy your BFF, but she knew what game you were talking about before you put it up. So
thank you, Tammy. Tammy knows.
She does know. I know she has a gaming channel as well. So yeah, maybe she's played that on there. So I wanted to bring up one other point that I feel could have an impact on your writing, and correct me if I'm wrong. But I actually had this discussion with Bryce from Wraithmarked when he was on here. So you have a degree in kinesiology, right? Which means that you know how the body works. And I mentioned before, humor is subjective, but reading is subjective, right? So certain things in a book might bother or impress a certain person based on the different experiences they've had in their life and not affect another person in the same way. So an example for me that I give is Japanese, right? I speak it in my daily life. So if I see it in a book, I know I'm going to be harsher on that because it's something I do in my daily life. So it's something that I keep in mind when I'm reading a book. As someone who knows how the body works, does that affect the way you read books sometimes? Like the fight scenes or maybe injuries someone has? Are you ever bothered by something and you know it's because of your innate knowledge or your learned knowledge?
I hate it because Bryce totally stole my answer, and I don't know if maybe we discussed it like at the same, like at some retreat or something. But the one that always gets me is when somebody gets an arrow like right here, and then like they pull it out and they're like good to go, or you see them like the next day and they've got it bandaged up, but they're fine, they're up and they're moving around. No, your lung collapsed, buddy. Like everything is not fine. That is the one that bothers me, but it also bothers me because I actually had a spontaneous pneumothorax. I've had two of them. And for people who hate big words, that is when your lung collapses for no reason. So I was literally like sitting at my desk in high school and like I was working on something and my chest started hurting and I was like, like this feels uncomfortable. I wonder what's going on. Now, my mom is a big essential oils girly. Essential oils can fix anything. And so I went and I told her, I was like, I don't feel so good. She's like, oh, no problem. Let me rub your back with some essential oils and you'll feel better. So she's rubbing my back with essential oils. And I'm like, this isn't doing anything. In fact, it's getting worse. Just don't worry about it. I'm going to go to bed. And then like, I'm sure I'll feel better in the morning. The next morning I woke up, my fingernails were blue, my lips were blue. I couldn't really talk. It was hard to move my left arm because my O2 was so low. And so because my O2 was so low at the hospital, they couldn't put me under to do the surgery. So they had to do it with me awake. And so I won't get into the details if you don't want me to, because I know it's a little gross.
It's okay. We were talking about cosmic horror. We're on brand, horror. Go ahead if you'd like to.
So because they can't put me under because my O2 is so low and it'll slow my breathing too much. So they put on some topical like numbing stuff, which let me tell you, it whenever they say, oh, I'm putting something topical on, it never really touches it, does it? Like it never really helps that much.
No.
But they just turn you on your side and they have some people hold down your arms and some people to your side. They put it all the way through your chest cavity. So the tube is like inside where your lung sits basically. And then they sew the tube to your side and you carry around a box for the next like week or so. And all the air and fluid that's around your lungs drains out through the box. And so what's really horrifying about a spontaneous pneumothorax is every breath that you take in, you breathe in the air and then some of the air goes out through the hole in your lung and it makes the next breath harder to breathe in. So it's like drowning in your own air.
Sounds pleasant.
Yeah. So
Wow.
between the kinesiology degree and the spontaneous pneumothoraxes, yeah, the arrow in the shoulder, that's a sore spot for me.
That's a no.
Yeah. We don't do that.
We don't do that here. Oh, well, I'm glad you're all right. I mean, as someone who's also had, a lot of medical things in their life, it really affects the way that you view the world and the way that you experience stories as well. You're like, that's not how that works. It'd be nice if it worked that way, but it's not. So, well, I'm sorry that I asked you the same question as Bryce and he took your answer. You just happened to be on here first, but I wanted to see if there's any thoughts that you had on that.
Yeah, that's typical of him.
How
Stealing
dare.
my answers.
How dare. So we've talked about your writing, and the link to your book will be in the description down below. So everyone can go check that out. The Quest for the Golden Plunger. What is it? The Misadventures of the Adventurers?
Of the Adventure Rangers.
Adventure Rangers.
Instead of being called Boy Scouts, they're called Adventure Rangers.
Adventure Rangers.
Yeah.
Actually, before we move on from that, I did have one more question that reminded me. When you were an Eagle Scout, was there any experience where you were like, this has to go in the book? This is thing that I cannot leave out. Talk about subjective experiences.
Man, there are a handful of things that like did actually happen that were in the book. And for some reason right now, I can't think of like hardly any of them. But one that I can think of that I didn't put in the book was when you put teenage boys, all of them at summer camp, and you don't have enough adults to be watching them at all times, and everybody's hot, and everybody's kind of hungry, and everybody's really tired, inevitably, somebody's going to start a fist fight with somebody multiple times throughout the week. Like it is like Lord of the Flies. Okay. At least at the summer camp that I went to every year, it was Lord of the Flies. And so one year, I have a cousin, and he is just like if you guys think I'm wild, like he's on another level. He, because I know the line, right? Like as you said, I like to put like one toe over the line, just for a little bit of risky business. But then besides that, like want to keep the peace. He is not like that. He will take a joke all the way to its natural conclusion of getting punched in the face. And so there was a time that he did that with a guy who was like 3 or 4 years older than he was. I think the guy was like 17 and he was like, 14 or 15. And it was like, he got hit, he gets tackled to the ground. And it was like this big sigh from me because I was like, okay, here we go again. It's, I know it probably sounds like, oh my gosh, but like me and him, both did like 10 years of karate. So at least like we had that going for us. Yeah. So I am just kind of letting this happen, just letting him get it all out, whatever, until the guy starts choking my cousin and he starts like, his face starts turning a different color. And I was like, oh man, all right, now I have to do something. So I tackled the guy off him. And while I'm laying on the guy's like neck, upper chest area, and trying to give my cousin a chance to run up the hill, basically, the guy bit me, and he bit off my mole.
What?
Elizabeth Tabler, I'm so sorry because you just got here at the wildest part of the story.
Hi, Beth. Bit off your mole.
Yes, he bit off my mole.
Detailed spot to go for.
I know. It was just like on my side, and he just like I think he was just mad because he was cussing up a storm the entire time, and he bit. And what's funny about like Boy Scouts is like this guy got pushed to his limit by my cousin. I'm not saying either of them were right or wrong, but he got pushed to his limit by my cousin. Unfortunately for him, it is so much worse to be the guy who ate somebody's mole than it is to, be the guy who, couldn't take a joke or something.
Right.
so he never lived that one down until
Oh.
he was like gone and out from Eagle Scouts. And
Oh.
it's something that I would have loved to have gotten in there. And there's a couple like fist fights in Quest for the Golden Plunger, but yeah, I didn't put it in there.
Well, I mean, I feel like we were here for the whole physical delivery, so we can get it. But if you just say to someone, yeah, there's a scene where someone bites off someone's mole, like that's a hard sell.
It is a hard sell.
So I don't blame you for not putting that in. But I figured it would be something like that. I did Girl Scouts until I was a brownie, but I actually rage quit because I saw the Boy Scouts building fires, and I was inside poking holes in a tin foil thing to make a design so we could shine a light through the design. And I was like, this is some bullshit. I'm rage quitting. I want to do that.
So you aren't the first person that I've heard this from. I've heard this like a million different women I've known my entire life say this exact thing. They were like, I quit Girl Scouts because why was I doing arts and crafts while they were getting to shoot guns and, bows and arrows and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And so in the Quest for the Golden Plunger, the whole time there's a running joke about how, this was something from real life. In real life, it was fake. It was just a fantasy we made up because we were, hormonal 13-year-old boys. But we were like, there's a girls' camp across the lake. That's where the Girl Scouts are. And it was like the fantasy that got us through the week. We're like, and so in the book, I actually put a Girl Scout camp across from it. But just like how the Adventure Rangers are called that instead of Boy Scouts, the Girl Scouts are not called Girl Scouts. They're called the Home Ec Scouts.
Accurate.
And like it's one of those things where it's like it's not to make fun of like girls or girls' interests or anything like that. It's to make fun of Girl Scouts because I'm glad that girls can join Boy Scout or it's just called the Scouts now. But I'm glad because low-key they were always in the Scouts. Like people's little sisters just tagged along to like every camp out or every meeting. Like that was a thing. Yeah. And so, I am sorry that you didn't get that experience, but I'm glad that other people can go make fires instead of poking,
Yeah, I just remember that so viscerally. I was making this like seal design with a seal balancing a ball on its head. And I'm like, what is this nonsense? Yeah. And I agree. If you want to do arts and crafts, it's fine. But that's not what the marketing was. The marketing was learning survival skills. So please teach me that. Right. So
Right. Because if you want to do arts and crafts, by all means. There are days I would have loved to have gone and done arts and crafts instead of getting my mole bit off.
Yeah. Still wild.
Yeah.
Okay, so what I'd like to do now is shift to something that all three of us know quite a bit about, and that is interviewing. Okay, so it's always interesting to interview an interviewer. Yes. What we do in our interviews, or at least our recent interviews, your recent series Between Two Perns, it's very different, but there are a lot of base skills that I think that you share being an interviewer of any sort. But I kind of wanted to start with how you approach people to come onto the show, because something that PL and I have said continuously, and I'm sure we'll continue to say, you'd be amazed at how many people say yes if you just ask. And sometimes that can lead to other connections, other yeses in the future. So one thing that I saw through other interviews that you did is that you had actually done a cold approach for Campfire in the first place, and we will get to Campfire. So I'm wondering if that experience of doing a cold approach for Campfire and it turning out the way that it did, do you think that that gave you some of the confidence and some of the insight to be able to start an interview series where you started with big names and now you're figuring out where to go from there? That's an interesting space to be in with a new interview series, right? So do you think that cold approach working the first time around when it came to Campfire, did that have an effect on the way that you approached guests going forward?
I don't even know that Campfire was necessarily like the impetus of it. Like I don't know if it's how I was brought up. Like, I don't know if it's, nurture, nature. I don't know what it is, but like, I've always been kind of like a confident person in terms of specifically, like, I don't care to embarrass myself. I don't really get embarrassed. Like, other people, I think, are really worried about, like, that they're going to look stupid or, you know, whatever it is. And like, whatever embarrassed bone there is in someone's body, mine was missing a long time ago. And so, like, the number one thing I always tell people is, like, just shoot your shot, because legitimately the worst anybody can say is no. Yes. Oh my gosh. What excellent timing, Beth. That's exactly right.
Yes.
Except I made a joke to someone the other day. I was like, they were like, you should ask John Gwynn if he would do an episode of Between Two Perns. They were like, the worst he can say is no. And then they were like, actually, he's a pretty good writer, so he could probably say some worse things than no.
Yeah, if you wanted to, if you got creative about it, right?
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know that it was Campfire specifically, like that cold outreach that kind of gave me the confidence to do this. I think it's just kind of part of who I am. Like, it's a skill that served me well at Campfire, reaching out to people for different things, and now doing the interviews. Yeah, I guess I would just really encourage people to just go for it. Like, nobody's gonna think you look stupid, you know? Like, just try.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's cliche advice, but I think PL and I both think that way.
Yeah, and because Beth Tabler is here, Beth, shout out again to Beth, our wonderful boss at Before We Go Blog, which is our wonderful blog site, which we're a part of, Taylor and I, as assistant editors. Beth has interviewed some what people would consider huge names. And, you know, so she knows better than a lot of people. Shooting your shot, I mean, you know, it takes guts, right? That's something Beth definitely has. But yeah, like the results can sometimes be absolutely incredible. You know, and that's something that, you know, Taylor and I have definitely, I concur with Taylor 1,000% that, yeah, that's definitely something that we've seen. And sometimes we've looked back and gone, wow, you know, it's not about, you know, necessarily, we have our fanboy and fangirl moments. We can't help that. That's just, you know, the people are people, but you can't help when it's people that, you know, speaking of fanboy moments, Daniel Green. Wow.
Hey, thanks for joining us, Daniel. Appreciate it.
Okay, I'll shut up now because Daniel Green's
So yeah, this is true. I've seen Jackson shoot his shot, and the impressive part is usually hits his target. From landing interviews to his wife, the guy's charisma score is off the charts.
A huge compliment. That's a huge compliment from a very big booktuber. So
yeah,
kudos.
He lies. He lies. He doesn't mean that. He beats me.
Behind the scenes. I
think he's going to start in front of the scenes soon, but
well, at least get it out in the open if that's the case.
Yeah.
But
also, hi Daniel.
Yes, thanks for joining us. Truly.
Yes, thank you.
But
Daniel.
I can say that I second what Daniel said. I said it at the beginning of this interview. But meeting you in Glasgow, that is the vibe that I get. And sometimes you can tell when someone else is a fellow interviewer, the way that the conversation goes, knowing when to wait and listen instead of speak is something that I think is a very underrated interview skill. And it's something that you have to develop over time. Some of it is innate and some of it you develop over time. But I was curious for you, when you interview, you're doing so many things at the same time, right? On a base level as an interviewer, you are, especially if you're live, right? You're checking comments, you're thinking about where you wanted the conversation to go. You're thinking about, okay, this is what they said, and now I would like to go down this route. How do I bring it back? There's just a lot going on. Plus, on top of that, you have to think about towing that line for Between Two Perns, right? So it's not a live format. So I'm wondering if, from your perspective, having that humor aspect is something that makes it easier for you, or it's another thing that you feel you have to juggle when you're doing an interview, because humor is so innate to you. So maybe it does make it easier. But from my perspective, as someone who does interviews, I'm like, wow, that would be a whole other thing to have to juggle, to be able to track that at the same time.
It does come pretty naturally. So I don't think it's something that's harder for me to keep up with. The times that it's actually the hardest isn't even in the moment. The time that it's the hardest is writing some of the questions, which I'm sure that you can kind of relate to. Like you do a great job writing questions, and Beth, like I have read so many of Beth's interviews. And she does a great job at writing questions. Daniel too. But I've also read a lot of interviews where it's kind of like a lot of the same questions. And for me, because of the humor, because of the format of the show, I get to kind of avoid those entirely. Or if I want to do one like that, then I get to kind of make fun of it. Where do you get your ideas from?
Yeah. Yes.
And so, yeah, I think for me, the hardest part about the humor sometimes is when you're actually writing the questions. It comes pretty easily when you're sitting across from the person. But the hardest interviews to write most of the time are the ones where it's like an author who has one main series or just like one book, because there's fewer things to pick at, and like their career, hasn't been like they haven't as long of a career. So there's fewer things to find in their past to pick at and like make fun of or whatever. Those are usually the hardest ones for me to write, because there's less material to work with. Because a lot of times humor is just making connections between two things. So I think that's when it's hardest for me is when there's a very limited
It's
scope.
not enough ammo for you.
Yes, exactly. When there's not enough ammo.
I mean, it must be such an interesting pitch, though, having something to connect it to with Zach Galifianakis, the being the inspiration for it. People have something to kind of go off of when you pitch this to them. But when you were first learning to pitch it, I imagine there was a line you had to toe. Like, this is the limit of where I will go, or I promise I'm not going to push you too far, right? So when you were trying to strike that nuance of pitching it to someone, is there any trick of the trade that you've learned over doing this that you would like to kind of share with us today? How to pitch something that's kind of a self-roast?
I think it kind of does itself a lot of favors. Just the very idea, right? Because authors get asked to do interviews all the time, and then this is something that's totally out of left field. It's new, it's different, it's interesting. Because it has to be done in person, it's like, hey, well, we'll both be at the same place at the same time. We could, just 20 minutes of your time, just come to my hotel room. That's the weirdest part. That's the weirdest part, is when you got to be like, okay, so could we do it in my hotel room? But yeah, I mean, as far as like when I reach out to people, I'm pretty candid about, what it is. Like, I think at first, there was kind of an idea in the comments, or like some, like in the community, people would ask like, or they seem to have the idea like, oh, like they had no idea what they do. They know every time. Well, except for twice. There's been twice that they didn't know, and I could talk about those 2 times.
If you'd like to, we're all ears.
Yeah, I'll get to that in 1 second. Sure. But I think for one, the idea is so different and interesting, and 2, I'm very candid about what it is. I even tell them, I'm like, I will poke fun at you. I will probably call you a plagiarist. It's supposed to be fun, though, is the point. It's not supposed to be hateful. I tend to avoid, like, if somebody does have like some big controversy or something, I try to avoid that, because like, even if there's a lot of things that I could make fun of about it, first of all, probably the internet's already done a much better job of making fun of it than I ever could. But also, like, when you bring that sort of thing into it, that's kind of when it's like, it's not fun anymore, right? And if an author has a bad experience, word's going to get around, and nobody's going to want to do an interview with you anymore.
Yes, whisper networks are real.
Yeah. But one of the times that somebody didn't know what they were getting into was, I did not know that Robin Sullivan actually answers a lot of Michael Sullivan's emails for him. That I don't know if you've seen that interview, but that interview, like everything that Robin does, that's not a joke. Robin is like a powerhouse. And so I had no idea when I interviewed Michael that Michael did not know the pitch, did not know what we were sitting down to do. And kudos to him, because he figured it out real quick, and then he rolled with it. So
yeah.
that was a time that somebody didn't know, but it turned out just fine.
Well, there comes the skill of knowing the line, right? From your side and being like, oh, you don't know, do you? And then just kind of having to go around that, right?
Right.
Then we have punching down
Yeah.
instead of punching up is what Beth put out there. And also, I think folks forget authors are just people, and often they have a sense of humor.
That's very true. And like another great part about the show, and I think why like I get a lot of comments on like every video. There was at least one comment where they're like, I think this is my favorite episode, or this is the best one yet. And I think people say that because, like, you know, you're coming off of just finishing the video and you just laughed and like you've got like a lot of good feelings. But the show tends to self-select for that reason. Like Beth says, like authors have a sense of humor, but the ones who don't, or the ones who maybe aren't super comfortable with this kind of thing or with this format, they self-select out. So theoretically, there won't be a bad episode of Between Two Perns because if somebody won't be able to take a joke, right? Like they're going to avoid my email. They're just not going to respond.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Peel. Sorry.
No, I didn't want to interrupt. Go ahead.
Well, something else that's interesting about your journey as an interviewer is you kind of did the opposite order that a lot of us do, right? This is something that you've talked about quite often, and how you didn't know you were going to get the opportunity to interview Sando, and you were able to come up with some of these wonderful questions just before, right? So it was a surprise to you as well. So I imagine you've done this interview. You're like, now what, right? What do I do after starting here? So I'm curious, now that you're back into the swing of things, I know that you've got a lot of people lined up. You've done a lot of conventions in order to get some backlist ready for all of us waiting. You know, you've got content coming out. But what was the experience like kind of resetting, recalibrating after starting at such a high point?
You know, like this is going to sound weird because, and like, I have so much respect for Brandon Sanderson. I love his work and everything. But like, he's an author, and so is all the other people that I interview. They're all authors too. So while, yeah, like that first video, like it's done more views than any of the other ones. It's, you know, it's by all means, it should be like a weird thing for me. Like, oh, like how do I did that for fun. And like all the ones that came after it, I did those for fun too. So for me, it's not like so much of I need to get like the biggest people to interview. It's more about like what's going to make for a fun interview that the most people will enjoy. It happens to be that a lot of people have read bigger authors and they like care more about some of those works and things like that. So that is a natural reason to go with those. But you know, it's doing satirical author interviews, besides, you know, Brandon Sanderson or, you know, Stephen King or something, like that's you're kind of at the pinnacle. And so satirical author interviews is never going to be something that like consistently gets like, you know, 500K views per video or something. Like it just can't. Yeah. So for me, starting there, it was a great jumping off point because it was a proof of concept. And I do think it's made it easier to get like other like interviews and that sort of thing. Yeah.
Yes.
Hopefully that answers. I rambled, but
no, that definitely answers it. And I resonate with a lot of what you said. Something that we found with page chewing over the years is, of course, it's wonderful to be able to talk to people that you admire, especially authors whose stories who have impacted your life, right? I always talk about interviewing Fonda Lee, one of those moments for me. Her Greenbone saga is incredible for me. So there's always going to be a joy there. But the main reason we do what we do is the connections. It's not connections in the sense of networking, connection to human connection. Because if you want to make some money, let me just tell you, if you're watching this, interviewing in the bookish space is not the place to be. Okay.
Ain't the way.
No, it's a wonderful thing, and we all do it because we love it. But if you ask anyone who's interviewing this space, it is not going to be, you know, you're not going to be buying a yacht off of this money, right? So what you said really resonated with me, because they are just people, and it's that person to person connection that is the core, right, of everything that we do. So it's really nice to hear that from your perspective as well.
Like, I enjoy doing the interviews. I love editing them when like it all comes together and like it's really satisfying. But honestly, like, I call it aftercare, because one of my favorite parts about doing the show is just the 10 or 15 minutes afterwards where, you know, I turn off the cameras and everything and I just walk them to their panel, or I walk them back to the convention center or whatever. Just because it's like, okay, you just got roasted or whatever for 20 or 30 minutes, and like, let's just be people, and we will talk about anything and everything. We'll talk about, you know, books, or, you know, our pets, or, you know, whatever it is. And that's one of my favorite parts about doing the show, is just getting to like hang out with another person who is really excited about the same things that I am.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I know Taylor will get to it anyways, but yeah. But speaking of, Beth had interviewed Brandon Sanderson, and she commented said he's a great guy. So you know, that is yeah. But I think one thing that Taylor and I have spoken about a lot, and we specifically spoken about with authors, is that sense of confidence when it comes to your writing, especially after you have a few books on your belt, but still there's a bit of a tightrope that you might feel that you walk sometimes, in that, you know, you write the book you want to write and you feel confident in that, and you want to write that book the way you want to. But you can't be tone deaf to criticism. You can't be tone deaf to, for example, beta readers or editor feedback or etc. Right? And you know, but still, like, you know, you might get that review. It's like, oh, that was a tough review. You might get, you know, that might be one out of many glowing ones. But still, it might be something that, you know what, I'm wondering, based on this person's feedback, you know, like I potentially there's some exposure here. Maybe they have some there. Maybe you've got a couple of reviews that are overall great, but they say, you know, there's one element that's good. There's a commonality, a common thread that, oh, maybe that's something I need, an exposure in my writing I need to address, you know. But humor, that's a whole other ball game, right? Because, you know, someone can say, okay, well, you know, that character or that plot or your pacing, but when someone says, you know, that joke, your humor didn't land with me, right? That's kind of on another level. So how do you cope with that? And I know it's very different in both streams, you know, interviewing versus doing YouTube versus writing, but how do you handle that on both ends? Like, you check out YouTube and you got a bunch of comments like, that those jokes really, I wasn't feeling those jokes, man. That was, you know, kind of, or in the writing, you know, when you check Goodreads or Amazon, you get reviews like how do you cope and process that?
Yeah, so a couple things. One, I think I tell everybody, like, Quest for the Golden Plunger, the audiobook is better than the print book. Like, there's no question, because the reader is Todd Haberkorn, and he does such a phenomenal job at landing the jokes. He like tells them with the right cadence, to where I think sometimes the hard part about writing humor is this is going to sound so bad, is the reader. Because if you're not like reading it in kind of the right tone, right, the right cadence, then yeah, the joke's not going to land. And so one challenge for an author is you have to kind of set it up so that they know that's coming, so that they know to read it in, you know, that way. And so to your question about how do I cope with that sort of thing, if somebody says like something didn't land, you know, if it's like one or two comments, whatever, you know, that's like, yeah, because on a bunch, like on the Brandon Sanderson video, right, I still get comments from time to time of people who are like, what the heck? Why is this guy being mean to Brandon? And it's like, guys, I promise you.
Kind of it. Like, here's the point. Here's you. Like,
I promise you, he's okay. So if it's one or two, whatever. Because as you say, like, it's just like writing a book. You're rarely are you ever going to find a book that connects with everybody. And as Taylor said, like, there's people who say that they don't like Sanderson's humor, right? And so it's like, yeah, if Sanderson can't do it all right, then, you know, everybody should give themselves a break.
Yeah.
So unless there's like, now the difference would be if I get like a ton of comments on one video and they're like, buddy, this one wasn't it. I would be like, okay, there's something to learn here. Because I've usually got, you know, a pretty solid, you know, compass as far as this kind of thing goes. And so if I got a lot all at once, I would have to pay attention to that, I think, and be like, okay, where did I go wrong? Maybe this is like a cultural or regional, you know, something that I think is really funny, or some really niche part, you know, spooky fish, right? Some really niche thing related to that I'm going to find hilarious that other people aren't. But beyond that, like, and that I absolutely speak from like a ridiculous place, because we finished that interview and Brandon Sanderson looked me in the eye and he told me, that was hilarious. I bet you do this all the time. And I was like, whoa.
Totally, bro. Yeah, I'm so practiced in this.
And so, like, that's something that know a number from me, because Brandon Sanderson told me that I was funny. So there's things that I have to learn, certainly, but I am a weird case in that I have like the pinnacle of compliments that I can look back on and be like, you know what? Maybe this wasn't right for that person, but somebody that I really respect and look up to has said nice things about like this thing that I do. So I have that to hold on to.
Yeah, the internet can be harsh, you know? So having those real world experiences really makes a difference. And actually, that's a perfect segue into what I want to talk about next, which is Campfire. So from what I've seen of Campfire, you all seem to have the mentality of be the change you wish to see in the world, right? Speaking of creating a better space in the bookish community. There's a lot of talk of, well, I'll let you make the pitch as the CMO, Chief Marketing Officer. But what I have seen is there's a lot of emphasis on making sure that authors get a fair cut, that writers have services that serve them and is actually what they want in a writing software, and that you make it more accessible to readers as well. So that's what I refer to when I say being the change you want to see in the world. You guys noticed things that you didn't like about the services that we had, and now you want to fill that hole with the services that you provide. So if I could hand it off to you for a moment here, let's imagine no one's heard of Campfire before, or I'm someone who's never heard of them before. How would you pitch this software or explain it to someone?
Yeah, so Campfire is a writing and world building software where you can kind of keep track of all the different facets of your world all in one place. So we have, like, I should know off the top of my head, I think 16 different modules. We have everything from timelines to characters, maps, locations. We added calendars last year. Like, you can make your own fantasy calendar, which is cool. And so, like, for me, right, it is hard when I have a cast of, 30 characters to remember, like, oh, what color is this person's eyes, or, whatever tiny detail. Campfire is an easy way that you can go and you can reference a specific character, a specific location, and you can find, if you're good about, going and putting that stuff down, you can just go back and look and see, and it can save you a lot of time as far as continuity errors and going back and looking through things. Because if you go back and you look at your manuscript, you're going to get distracted and you're going to start noticing things that you want to change. And then suddenly you've edited, for an hour instead of written for an hour. So Campfire is a great way for people who especially work well with like need visuals, because everything is panel based for the most part. There's a couple modules that aren't. So you can kind of move everything around. You can decorate it kind of the way you want. You can put on themes and different fonts. We have tried to make it as customizable and accessible as we possibly can. And so where that took us was, we were like, okay, well, now wait a minute. We've got this thing that a bunch of writers write on, and they've got all their world building here. And then you have somebody like Sanderson, let's say. Sanderson talks about how every side character in his books has a backstory. And we don't always get to see it because, it doesn't always serve the story to know like what this random merchant does and where he came from. But I think we can all agree that there's certainly people, definitely not people on this call, definitely not people in this room right now, who would love to know that stuff. And And so we were like, what if we gave people a way to be able to actually like sell their like world building, their supplementary content, stuff that they already have, and just give authors another like revenue stream to earn money off of doing not much more work than they've already done. Like the work is already done. And then readers can get something that they're interested in too. And that's kind of what led to Campfire, where you can publish your ebooks, you can publish your world building, and you can sell them. There's 80% royalties. So like we literally gave authors like as much as we could do. Because Campfire, we don't even make 20% off of it, because 5% immediately goes to like credit card fees and all that crap. So we make like 15%. We're not trying to make our money off of selling ebooks. We're trying to make our money off of the cool software that we've built, and then give those authors a way that they can make that money back that they've already invested in the company. And then we have this beautiful ecosystem. That's the goal. And yeah, it is very much like be the change you want to see in the world. And like maybe this is where this is going, but I think one of the biggest, hardest parts about it has been just the very thing that we're kind of trying to fight, which is Amazon. Kindle Unlimited. It makes things very difficult because we can't get a lot of books, like a lot of the books from the indie community. If you're indie, like a lot of the the common knowledge, the advice that people give is that you should go Kindle Unlimited. And there are some authors like Olivia Atwater does this very well, who can make a living indie wide, but it's definitely harder. And I think it's trickier. So we've got this weird chicken and egg situation where like we're trying to create the best possible place for authors to be, but it doesn't make sense for all authors, I guess, to be there right now, because,
Right.
You look at somebody like Bryce O'Connor, right, who writes progression fantasy. Progression fantasy, you have to be on Kindle Unlimited. You have to. And if he were to put his books wide, he would see, a huge hit to his income. And authors make money. So we're still kind of exploring, how we can do that the best we can.
Right. Well, we recently had Adam Bassett. He does the UI.
Does he?
For you all. In case you didn't know, I'll tell you about your employees. But for those who are watching, that's another page chewing episode. If you'd like to check that out, I'll have that link down below. But one of the things that he mentioned is, his particular contributions are making sure that the user interface is so different and unique and interesting for those who are using it that it would stand out. Right. Or at least that's what I got. Those weren't his exact words, but that's what I got from a lot of the things he was talking about and being excited about creating. So being able to, as you said, kind of change the environment in which you're reading, change the headings, small changes that you can do to make the reading match you, that exclusive content, possibly interactive maps. So it sounds to me like making, like you said, your software unique and interesting is one of the main points you can use to start to shift the marketplace a little bit, right? So if you want a new experience, come here, we have that for you, kind of thing.
I think so, because people have kind of tried to do like luxury ebooks isn't really like a thing. And that's kind of, what we're toying around with right now is the idea of a luxury ebook where you get all this extra stuff, you unlock it as you read. Yeah.
I think that there would be a market for that. I mean, the explosion of physical special editions, why could that not be recreated in a digital space? I think you guys are really onto something there with that. I mean, if my shelves are not, an example of how much money people will sink into pretty things, I think that you could definitely tap into that.
Oh,
I may or may not be volunteering.
These aren't even all the bookshelves, right? Like there's more bookshelves over there. So I get it.
Listen, I have 2 libraries. I have my one here in Japan and then in the States. And my parents are like, stop sending us books. They're like, we have nowhere to put them. Like, the shipping across the world was too much. Like, we don't care. Just ship it to yourself or don't send any more here. I'm like, all right. Speaking of Gunmetal Gods, that edition just arrived there. They're like, you got another book. I'm like, thank you.
That's awesome.
And that's a stunner. That one's a stunner.
Oh, I can't wait to get my
Yeah.
little
Oh,
finger.
it's back there. Yeah, Zamil sent to me. Oh, it's a stunner. It's a stunner.
Cannot wait. Okay, so thank you for that campfire pitch, though. You have sold me on it. Beth says, someone save me from myself. Amen. Actually, I have had to block accounts temporarily, so that I don't see new editions released because I can't. Your girl's got Christmas coming up, okay? I got things that I need to save for.
I hear you.
Year round for me. So many sprayed edges. Yeah. So
we can just figure out how to get sprayed edges digitally. We'll be set.
Look at that. Well, you've got the color Kindles are coming out now. So I mean that's Amazon, but I assume that your software could be used. No, let me not speak for you.
So
only on the Campfire app, right? So you wouldn't be able to use e-readers.
Right. The experience, the visuals, the way it's all presented, you couldn't really do. We've toyed around with the idea of basically making an export system where you can just kind of the software kind of outputs all of your world building content onto a nice page for you, so you could put that onto EPUBs or something.
Right.
And it's one of those things where it's like a big nasty software development nightmare.
Right.
Making all that work and work well.
Yeah.
So down the line.
Yeah. I didn't want to. I'm glad I stopped there because I didn't want to speak for you. But yeah, color would be, I think, a big aspect if you have color as part of your interactive features. Maybe you could do a sprayed edge when you flip it. You see a little swipe of color or something. That could be interesting. Yeah.
Well, you should tell Adam.
I will. Let me message him. So now that we've talked about all of the different things that you do in the bookish space, you write stories, you interview people who tell stories, and you create spaces for people who want to share their stories, right? And one thing that I think is overlooked as a storytelling medium is something that you also have a passion for, which is gaming. I am a wannabe gamer. Okay. I fell in love with Kingdom Hearts in middle school and thought that I was doing something. And so since then I've bought games periodically, but it's just I am not good at video games. But I think that experience with Kingdom Hearts when I was young taught me that I can get wrapped up in a story that's a visual medium like that. So I wanted to give you kind of some space to talk about some games that you love. And if you could tell us one game that you think has the most underrated story, something that people should be looking into for inspiration. Take your time to think about it, because I know that there's a lot to choose from.
And does it have to be underrated, or can it just be the one that everyone needs to experience once?
Let's do that one.
Okay.
I want to know that one. So
Outer Wilds. Okay. This game, I was pitched this game for years by my friends. They're like, you just got to play it. You just have to. And I'm like, no, because it's in space. I'm a fantasy guy. Sci-fi is really not my thing. I can do sci-fi at certain times, but a lot of the times, spaceships and the blasters. I skipped. People hate me for this. I skipped Mass Effect. I skipped Fallout. But I played Skyrim. I played Elden Ring. That's just the vibe I like. Outer Wilds. You explore this galaxy in a spaceship, and you discover the story as you explore the world. And sort of the gimmick, and this isn't a spoiler because you find out 20 minutes in. The gimmick of it is you have 20 minutes and then the sun explodes and you die. And then you Groundhog Day, wake back up, and you get to try again. And so there's this kind of game that's called a roguelike, where every time you play, or let's say the first time you play, you can't beat level 1. You maybe could if you're really just good at games, but you're probably not going to beat level 1. But you got halfway through level 1 and you unlocked all this new stuff. So then on your next run, you have all this new stuff to play with, and you were easily able to beat get wrecked by level 2. And it keeps going like that, where you just have to keep unlocking stuff and making these incremental upgrades to be able to play the game and get to the end. This game is I would describe it as an informational roguelike because you don't get upgrades that persist after each death. You just have knowledge. You have the things that you learned in each 20-minute session. And if this game sounds interesting to anybody right now, the number one thing I would tell you is to not look up another thing about it, because that's the problem. That's the beauty of the game. It's the best part about it. Once you only get to play it once, you only get to experience it once, and you can never have that same experience again. So if you get something spoiled for you and you kind of know more than you should, or you go maybe do things in the wrong order, there's not really a wrong order, then like it takes away some of the magic. It truly is a game where you can explore and discover the story, and everyone plays it a little bit differently. And it is both an amazing story and just an amazing experience. Like, perfect example of how you can never play it again. The first time I played it, I think it took me about 15 hours. And I think that may even be on the slower side, so don't judge me. But I could go beat it in 20 minutes right now. And like, that is the sad. If I could wipe my brain and play that game again, oh my gosh, I would do it in a heartbeat. Phenomenal.
You've completely sold me on that. But that's a hard sell for me because I'm that mini game person. Like, I need to have collected all of the items before I'm satisfied. So I feel like
this very much. That's actually that works for it very well.
Oh, okay.
Because the part of like the knowledge that does persist is you got this little map and it shows you like where there's still clues on like which planets. So you know, like, oh, this is where I need to go explore. And so if you get all the clues, then you have the full story and the game is that much better. So I actually think it's a perfect fit. You have no excuse.
I don't. I'll have to report to you once I purchase it. Actually, my daughter, she's just over 1 year old, and she was playing with the controller, and she bought a game, and we just returned it. So now I have that money to use. So I think maybe I'll have to look into that game.
You should go it if you need any more convincing, because the thing that finally pushed me over the line to be like, fine, because like it's such a hard sell to your friends or to anybody. Like, you have to go play this game. You can't look up anything about it. You just have to play it.
Yeah.
The thing that finally sold me was I don't know if you play games on the PC somewhere else.
No,
well,
I got PlayStation.
It's on PlayStation, I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
But there's a website called Steam, and that's like the big place that everybody buys their games from. Go just look at the reviews of Outer Wilds on Steam. There is like 200,000 reviews, and they're all positive universally. And every review is like, stop reading reviews and go play this game. And that is what finally made me go, okay, fine, I have to just see what this is about. And I think it maybe took me like an hour for it to click. And then when it like clicked and I was like, oh, this is what we're doing, I was like, phenomenal. I can't say enough good things about Outer Wilds.
Well, what stuck with me from that description is all you have going forward is knowledge. I mean, if that ain't life, right?
Yeah.
I think it's such a perfect metaphor for that. Yeah, so I think that's such an interesting recommendation on the basis of storytelling, because in my mind, I always think that long RPGs that have a long story arc, that's going to be what most people recommend. So it's so interesting to hear like a mini episodic game be recommended as a form of storytelling. But as someone that has played a lot of different games, lots of different types of games, what do you think is the most unique aspect of storytelling through the video game lens perspective, through that medium? What's unique about that isn't in other forms?
Oh man, it starts with an E, and I can't think of the word.
E.
There is this type of storytelling where it's like you kind of create the story as you go, as you like learn. I have like a 6,000 word cosmic horror script. If I can find it, I can't find it quickly. But I talk about this and that because I haven't made the video yet, but like I can't wait to.
Well,
but
you've
it's
described
this,
it well enough, so I got the picture. Yeah.
yeah. And so it's like, you don't all, sometimes there is a story like with Elden Ring or something where there are like bits and pieces to pick up, but a lot of times you play a game like, let's say like Minecraft or I mean, the same thing can happen in Elden Ring too, where you'll have things that happen to you and like it does kind of create a narrative. And that is so interesting. You can't get that in a book. You really can like just go off the rails and come back and tell your friends the craziest stories and things that you did. And it was not a scripted event, right? And I think that is so interesting. It's like maybe the best like book to describe it would be like House of Leaves or something, where it's like,
Mhm.
I don't know like what this is. Everybody's going to get something different out of this.
Mhm.
But that's not even, I don't think, adequate.
Choose your own adventure, or just the interactive nature of it, right? So
Yeah.
not only are things happening to you, but your actions can then have real world, that's not the right word that I was looking for, real time effects that then change where the story is going, right? So that interactive kind of aspect to it, maybe.
Yeah, definitely. I would seem so smart if I knew this word off the top of my head. It's so unfortunate that I have no idea what word this is.
Leave it in the comments. Just
I'll
put it in
leave
all
it.
caps down there, and
I will.
I'll pin it so that
That's
people
exactly what
see
I'll
it.
do. Thank you. I will.
Perfect. I got you. Before we leave video games, though, I just want to do one shout out because I heard you mention this game offhand in another interview that you did, and I got so excited, which was Pokemon Crystal. Okay.
Yes.
When I tell you that I thought I was a gamer, okay, it was Kingdom Hearts 1 and Pokemon Crystal. I played that so much on my Game Boy Color.
That game is how I learned how to read.
Really?
Yeah. Pokemon Crystal.
I can't remember the name of that legendary Pokemon, but I can see it so clearly in my head.
Lugia or Ho-Oh?
Lugia, that one. Lugia, yes.
Yeah.
That one. So you fell in love with the game, and then through playing it, you were able to pick up reading. Is that how that happened? Was it kind of a natural? What was the? I guess I'm asking for what was the origin point for that? Were you like, I like Pokemon, let's do this game, or?
Yeah, that was pretty much it. I loved Pokemon. I watched the cartoon like as a kid. There was a brief period of time I wasn't allowed to watch it because I had nightmares about Bulbasaur. Don't know why. Bulbasaur's adorable, but you know.
If you put the right twist on it, he could look a little nightmarish.
Yeah, I think I was getting like vine whipped or something. I still viscerally remember this. This has got to be one of my like earliest memories because he was like vine whipping and I was like, this ain't it. But yeah, it was just, I loved the show as a kid. And then, I got the game for a birthday and I was like, I don't remember, I was 3 or 4. And I was like, I want to be able to do this. And like, I would just keep restarting, like, because I didn't know what to do and I'd get stuck. And so that was the thing that like pushed me to learn how to read and to really make an effort at it at a really young age, because I just really wanted to play Pokemon. So.
Again, I don't know why we're the same person, but I'm resonating with that a lot because when I was young, my mom didn't want me to watch Pokemon because she thought it was too violent. Let me tell you how. I wrote a dissertation. I had a dissertation ready for this woman because it was on right when I finished school and I wanted to watch it with my friends. I prepared. I made little slides on sheets of paper as to why I should be able to watch Pokemon. So I felt very strongly about it as well. So clearly it impacted both of our learning experiences.
PL, did you miss this? Like, did you didn't connect with Pokemon?
Don't forget, I got some gray hair, so a lot of my kids.
Okay.
So I'm 55. So my oldest son's 35. So my oldest son's 35. So so bit of a different generation gap there. So I was still rocking back when I was younger, I was rocking the the Atari and the Game Boys and all the really old stuff back then, and the stuff you got in arcades, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that, up until of course, into more modern gaming. But yeah. So different era, different
It's not too late, PL.
Yeah.
It's not too late.
Just find the time, man.
Do you have any games, PL, that were significant to you that you think had a
Oh
spot?
yeah, Tech Mobile, the
Okay.
old Tech Mobile. That is so NFL football. That is like that's so iconic. I can't tell you how many hours I wasted with my friends in someone's garage. Just and it was ridiculous because you talk about lit RPG, like you had players that were so good. It didn't matter. Once you had them, you couldn't stop them. Like if you had Bo Jackson, right? Like you can't stop Bo Jackson. He just runs for a touchdown every time he gets the ball. So it was like I said, those are some fond memories. So but I have not gamed in decades. I don't have time now. I just with writing and work, family life, Deb, everything else, kids, grandkids, but if I was going to, I have friends that still game. They're my age. They game a lot. Most of my friends are doing more of the sports games, right? Especially Madden and like the stuff like that. But I do love fantasy. I'm a fantasy sports guy, so I like my fantasy football, fantasy baseball, stuff like that. So not the same kind of gaming, but bit less time intensive, right? Because if you're into gaming, you can just lose yourself, right? You can just like forget about everything else. The faucet's running and the house is flooded because you're what I mean? Like so, but
you're locked in.
Yeah, but so I don't have that time to game anymore. But maybe in retirement, who knows? Maybe that's one of the things that I can't see it. But my Deb's son is her old son. He's a big gamer. He goes nowhere without his system, and it is so elaborate. It looks like the Starship Enterprise. Like everything glows and lights up, and it's just like, yeah. But yeah, so whenever he comes to visit or we spend time with him, it's like, he's going to be sitting down there for a while. He's a big gamer. So not as much time for him either now too, because he has a little one, a 6-year-old. But yeah.
I cannot recommend Slay the Spire enough. I have 11K hours in it.
You have 11,000 hours in Slay the Spire.
Wow.
Beth, we have to talk. We have to talk, Beth. Oh my gosh.
I remember her mentioning this in the Before We Go blog chat. She's like, I don't know if I'm proud or ashamed, but like this is my number.
11,000. Beth, I don't know if I have 11,000 hours in all games total. And I've played Slay the Spire.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's just a testament to it's a testament to how much save me from myself yet again.
I had to do the calculation because I'm stuck at math, but 11,000 hours.
Give it to me.
11,000 hours is 458 days.
Beth.
Wow.
A year, Beth?
Over
458 days. So not like wow.
Over a year in a game.
Yeah, that's crazy.
In her defense, it's a great game. I'm not judging.
Yeah.
I'm impressed.
No, I'm not judging either. I'm just saying, wow, that's amazing. Like
I wonder if you add up how many hours we've spent lost in the worlds between these pages, how many years we would have spent doing that.
Yeah, that's true. Because, we both have our own channels. So even the short time I've been on, just, all your lives, all your vlogs, all your TBRs.
I don't want to think about editing time. Listen,
time.
Once when I was when my channel first began, right? I was trying to convince those in my family that this was a good life choice. And they're like, well, why don't you break down how much you should be paid per hour of editing? I was like, absolutely fucking not. No, that is not a number I ever want to know in my life. Okay. Like when I'm looking at an hour and a half of raw vlog footage, I do not want to think about what I should be getting paid to edit that down.
Yeah, I feel you on the editing time.
Yeah.
Well, Beth brought up an excellent point about books, right? Like I know I have definitely spent years of my life reading. There's no question about that. And I don't read nearly as much as I used to, but I have definitely spent years of my life reading. Beth is talking about all the books that she has, 2,800 books on Goodreads. Yeah,
Beth,
that
do
is
you
the last
sleep?
decade.
That is a very good question. Between Grimdark Mag and Before We Go blog and reading and 11
Beth is just a machine. She's not human. We know that.
Bring her on here. Bring her on. I have questions.
She's some kind of cyborg, some kind of AI.
She has been on the show, but we'll have to do a group chat. That would be real fun for all of us to get together.
I have questions.
Beth is amazing. She's just amazing. And of course, one of the highlights, we got to meet her in Glasgow, and that was just one of our
she's a delight.
Big highlights. Yeah, she's amazing.
Yeah, she's a delight.
Yeah. I can't believe it's already been an hour and a half. When did that happen? Good Lord. It always happens this way. Well, I don't want to keep too much of your time. We would love to have you back on in the future, but an hour and a half, it's late for you guys, early for me. Well, now I guess late as well, but with daylight savings, I guess, what is it for you? 8?
It's
8
about
o'clock.
9.
Oh, okay. 9 for you guys. So that's not too bad, actually. It used to be there was only a 1 hour difference. I'm all messed up because Japan doesn't do daylight savings, but the US does. Yeah. One time that shift happened when we had Evan Winter on. He came on the night of the daylight savings shift. So I was like, let me not be late for this man that I really want to talk to. I was backstage real early to make sure that I didn't mess that up.
I interviewed Evan last week.
He's such a delightful human.
Yeah, such a great guy.
Isn't he?
Dude, he's the nicest
great guy.
Oh
so
my
kind.
God.
Great guy.
So
great guy.
kind.
I admire
super intelligent.
him so much. Yeah,
super intelligent. Super intelligent.
Wildly intelligent. Everything he says is smart.
Yes.
And out of everybody that I've interviewed, I'm gonna look like the biggest jerk in that specific interview because every nasty, horrible thing, every awful question I ask, he's like, well, some people think that, and it's okay to think that, it's like, Evan.
That's what I was going to ask you is when you find someone that kind, the interview must feel different because it's like, no, you can toss something back. It's okay,
And the thing that I always tell everybody before the interview is I just say, be yourself. And that means something different for everybody. Yeah. Some people that means fire back the whole time and make fun of me. That is absolutely on the table. Some people that means lean into the chaos, like Robert Jackson Bennett's interview.
Yeah.
So chaotic. And then there's other ones where it's they get offended. And no, Evan Winter, he went for a totally new approach. He went for the make me look like an ass approach.
Kill him with kindness.
Yeah.
If anyone could do it, Evan could. Yeah,
he is
truly,
awesome.
Truly. Yeah. All right. So before we go, though, I want to give everyone a chance to do a sign off. If people weren't here in the beginning and don't know where to find either of you, why don't we begin with our guest of honor, Mr. Jackson over here, and then we'll go to PL. So Jackson, can you tell people where they can find you? And I'll have all of his links down below, everyone, once more. So go ahead.
I'm at Jackson D Author on pretty much everything. So yeah, Twitter. I'm tired. Twitter makes me so tired. So I don't know. Maybe when there's a new Twitter, I'll be a lot more active. So I'm not super active on Twitter, but on YouTube, Instagram, all that good stuff. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at.
Great. Wonderful. What about you, my illustrious co-host?
Oh, you can usually find me beside you on our channels doing page chewing. Other than that, on my own channel, the Drunk Kingdom Saga 7847, where I do my own interview series called 6 Elemental Interviews. Reviews, haven't been doing it as much recently, and deep dives and things like that. But mostly right now, it's 6 Elementals and page chewing, which is what I love. Connecting, of course, hanging out with my buddy Taylor, and connecting with wonderful people like Jackson. That's what it's all about, right? As Taylor emphasized. So the books, www.plstuart.com, the Drunk Kingdom Saga, 4 books out now. Book 5, A Pack of Wolves, coming in the spring of 2025. So thank you, Jackson. Yeah. So yeah, it's getting close. It's getting close now. 5 out of 7 books. So authoring's journey continues to take some wild and crazy turns. Sorry, takes a wild, crazy turn. So yeah, and before we go blog, how can we forget with Beth here, our fearless leader? Before we go blog, we're Taylor and our assistant editors. You can find some of my reviews there, book releases, all kinds of things like that. Goodreads, of course, as well. So yeah, so that's me. Twitter, social media, yeah, Twitter, X, whatever you call it. It is what it is. I'm still hanging on. That's mostly where I lurk. Also, Instagram and Facebook, not as much, and Blue Sky, which is rare. But yeah, for now, I'm hanging on to this thing called Twitter. Yeah, we'll see. So.
Well, I feel like there's been like 15 mass exoduses from X, and then everyone goes to disparate places. So we're just in flux. Like, I don't think anyone really knows where the home base is right now. So I'm also on all of those platforms at varying times. So those links are always in the description down below on my channel. If you have found this interview through Jackson, thank you so much for joining us. My name is Taylor, and my channel is Made Between the Pages. I do, your typical booktube content, book reviews, things like that, life in Japan vlogs, and page chewing, my pride and joy that I do with PL here. But once more, thank you so much, Jackson, for joining us, truly. You've been so generous with your time, and I'm so glad that we got to meet you in Glasgow.
Thank y'all very much. It was a pleasure to meet both of y'all when I met y'all in Glasgow, and it's been so nice to just get to chat for a little bit. So
yeah,
thank you guys very much for having me on. Are you guys gonna be at Worldcon this year?
Yeah, the Seattle, right?
Yeah.
So this is, I haven't made any official announcements, so there's no dates attached to this, but it does very much look like, despite recent developments, we are going to be moving to the States in 2025. My little family and I. So that means that Seattle is a possibility. It wouldn't have been otherwise, but yes, I'm assuming you're going as well.
I will be there.
Hey.
Hotel is booked. And
of course it is, BL. You are such a planner.
Oh, that's Deb. Deb's all over that stuff. She's got. You think I'm a planner? Deb has a level of organization that is in the stratosphere. So yeah,
that is incredible.
Yeah, we're booked. We're gonna do a combo trip and go out and see my oldest son that's out west in Western Canada, and then we're gonna come down and go to Seattle and hang out there for a bit. But then that'll probably be our last Worldcon for a while, though. It's great. It's amazing. It's kind of pricey, but then we're planning. Of course, again, we're planning for our head for Glasgow, which I believe is 2027 or 8. That's not Glasgow.
That's not even.
Sorry, not Glasgow. Sorry, Ireland.
Dublin.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's not even. There's no room in my brain for that date right now.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm gonna live that long. We'll just see.
Right.
I'm gonna say the wrong thing to somebody, and that'll be it.
No, we'll be fine. We'll be there. So yeah, but yeah. So hopefully I get to see both of you.
I'm sure we
Seattle.
will. Yeah, we'll be all closer to each other. So this is just the beginning of the connection. But yes, everyone who's watching post the live show, or those who are here with us live right now, thank you for being here. You are the people who make this what it is, truly. So we will see you on the next episode of Page Chewing. So